Hello, littles. Welcome back to Bedtime with Mama. Tonight we're going to go and read Chapter 10 of the Double Trouble Society. Chapter 10, The Witch Returns. Ramshackle the cat gave a low growl and a hiss as Maggie, Ivy, and Amy stared at her. "That's the Crowwood Witch," Maggie sneered, inching further and further away from the scraggly black cat. The cat was bony. What was left of its fur was matted, and its two front fangs were permanently on display, snagged on its upper lip. "Yes, that is my sister," Amy replied, without taking her eyes off the feline. Trapped in the body of a mangy cat for almost 300 years. I don't know how much she knows or remembers of what happened, but she still seems pretty angry at me. You can't stroke or even touch her, and she won't eat anything you give her. Even when I make her the finest fish cake, she turns up her nose. She'll only eat what she manages to catch herself in the garden. "She's been in my bedroom," Ivy whispered through trembling lips. "Sometimes she hides under my bed before I go to sleep." "So all that time we were searching for monsters under the bed, we should have been looking for a witch under the bed," Maggie said, looking totally stunned. "Oh, goodness, really? Your bedroom must fall under my protection spell," Amy said, going to the window and peeking out at Ivy's house. Maggie and Ivy weren't sure how long they'd been asleep after their tumble, but the autumn night was beginning to fall quickly. "When I cast that spell, there weren't houses on either side. It was mostly barren land. So your house must have been built partially within the spell. Sorry about that. You might be a bit younger than you think that you are, seeing as how you haven't been aging while you've been asleep." "That spell's broken now anyway," Maggie said, sliding off the sofa and moving to the same side of the room as Ivy and Amy. "So you don't need to worry about this daft cat sneaking in unnoticed anymore, Ivy." Ramshackle's body went still, its ears pricked up and its green eyes wide and alert, its gaze darting between Maggie and Ivy and Amy. "Maggie," Ivy warned, noticing that the cat was paying keen attention. "I don't feel really bad about breaking the circle. I do feel really bad about breaking the circle, but at least that's one good thing that's come from it, huh?" Maggie chuckled gently and shook her head. Ramshackle lifted a back leg and hooked it underneath its collar and began to tug furiously. "Maggie, I don't think talking about this in front of you-know-who is such a good idea," Amy pleaded gently. "So if the circle is broken already and the return of the Crowwood Witch is imminent, how is it going to happen?" Maggie asked. "I think we're about to find out." Amy moved herself between the girls and held out her arms in front of them as Ramshackle gave one final tug on its collar and finally snapped the leather band. The purple gem that once hung from Ramshackle's collar flew into the air, catching the light as it spun and tumbled into Amy's outstretched hand. Ramshackle fixed Amy with a hard stare, threw back its head, and let out a human cackle. It laughed hysterically, like it hadn't laughed in 300 years, and didn't stop. Suddenly, the black cat hunched at a disturbing angle and gave out a hideous crack that echoed around the room. Then, one by one, its legs bent in ways they shouldn't bend, and bones sounded like they had been broken in several splintering pieces. "Out of the house now!" Amy screeched as she grabbed the two girls by the backs of their school jumpers, practically lifting them off their feet and carrying them into the garden. "What's happening?" Maggie squealed as they ran down the path, scrambling through the gate and out onto the road in front of Hokum House. Amy reached into her boot and produced a long black wand. It had a purple gem on the hilt, and there was a natural knot in the wood a few centimeters above where her index finger wrapped around it. "You just told the Crowwood Witch that the main spell protecting the house had been broken," Ivy squawked. Maggie threw her hands up over her mouth, but it was far too late for that. The cat was out of the bag. Or rather, the witch was out of the cat. Now, let's not place any blame here, Amy said, brandishing the wand in front of them. This is a prophecy that was written centuries ago. This was going to happen sooner than later. Ramshackle let out a shriek of either pain or delight. None of them could tell. Yes, but later would be better than right now, mumbled Ivy. What is going on in there? The transformation from animal to human is never a pleasant one, but Emerald has been in that form for almost 300 years to the day. That's bound to make it a little harder and a little more painful to become human again. What happens when the transformation is complete? Maggie asked, as the windows of the house began to glow green and the sky began to get even darker. I don't know, girls. I really wish I did. Amethyst held out her hand on either side for the girls to take. Maggie and Ivy shared a look. If the Crowwood Witch was about to return, Amethyst was their best hope of getting rid of her again. Together they nodded and silently decided between them to take Amethyst's hand. Her long, slim fingers were ice cold as she squeezed their warm palms against hers. Suddenly, there was a scream so loud they had to let go and cover their ears. Then the scream turned into laughter, and the laugh filled with a mischief so dark and cruel it made Ivy and Maggie tremble. She's back, Amethyst said. The Crowwood Witch has finally returned. The shrieking from within the house grew louder and more ear-piercing, until finally a great flash of green light burst through the roof. Amy, your spell! Ivy tugged on Amethyst's long sleeve, hiding her behind her and peering with one eye past her shoulder at the gaping hole in the roof. The spell in the smoke. Now that the Crowwood Witch is back, we need everyone to remember her. Hokum House, too. She's right, said Maggie, shivering. The temperature had dropped, and Maggie and Ivy wrapped their arms tight around themselves. We need as many people as possible to be on our side and fight with us against her. Okay, stand back, girls. Amethyst rubbed her hands together, creating a purple glow. She began to mutter something under her breath, and then, with a great flourish, waved her hands at the smoke cloud swirling above Hokum House, still blowing from the chimney. A weak beam of light came from her hands, but barely reached the smoke. The green light came from the house, was like a theater spotlight, cutting through the dark with ease. The purple magic coming from Amethyst's hands was like a feeble torch, losing battery power with the second. No, 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 Amethyst muttered, rubbing her hands against her coat and trying again, but to no avail. Amy, what's wrong? Ivy said. My magic, it's not working, and I don't know why, Amethyst wailed. She kept muttering and waving her hands, scrunching up her eyes shut, but her magic did not get any stronger. I can't do it. She let the magic in her fingertips snuff out completely and drop her arms by her sides in defeat. Poor little Amethyst. A voice boomed all around them, coming from every direction all at once. Maggie and Ivy wheeled around, trying to work out where the voice was and how the witch had escaped from the house unnoticed. It's a trick, girls, a distraction. She's still in the house, Amethyst explained, not taking her eyes away from Hokum House. 300 years to practice and your spells still aren't up to scratch. Whatever have you been doing all these years? Sneered the witch's voice. I, on the other hand, have been biding my time, storing up every ounce of power I have, and now you'll never be a match for me, she crowed. Then Emerald let out a cackle so piercing that every window in Hokum House shattered. Amethyst threw her arms around Maggie and Ivy, shielding them from the shards of glass that shredded the air. When it was safe, she moved back to reveal the Crowwood Witch herself, floating above the hole in the roof, shrouded in smoke and green light. Emerald had hair so dark you almost couldn't see it against the black of night that had fallen around them. Tendrils flowed out around her as she was suspended in water. Her dress was covered in matted black fur. Her bare feet were dirty, and her toenails and fingernails were long and curved like the claws of a cat. But what rooted Maggie and Ivy in the spot were her eyes. Not only were the irises black, but so were the whites of her eyes. The curse of the Crowwood Witch had turned her insides as black as the charred pits of hell itself. You'll rule the day you broke the dozen's circle, Maggie Tabitha Tomb and Ivy Maple Erie. Because of you, I will eat the heart of the 13th child and finally reign supreme forever. Emerald let out one last blood-curdling cackle, and a green blast burst across the sky. Crows shot up into the air from their perch and took flight. The noise of their flapping wings surrounded like fireworks exploding through the sky. The smoke that had been black and glittery purple turned a putrid shade of green. The witch flew off through the air, and Maggie and Ivy and Amethyst followed the green smoke trail in the sky. A small hope that Emerald might be leaving, that they'd never see her again, and that she'd be someone else's problem to deal with grew in their chest. But that hope fizzled out when she saw the smoke trail finish at the summit of Crowwood Peak itself. 300 years after Emerald had splintered the rock and sent it tumbling towards the village, she was back, and now she was returning to set up camp. Amethyst raced inside the house with Maggie and Ivy quick on her heels. It was a mess. There was glass all over the furniture and the floor, not to mention a couple of disgruntled birds who, having made their nest on the roof, had fallen through when Emerald made her grand entrance. Amethyst ran to the fire in the hearth and emptied the contents of a small nearby cauldron over it to extinguish the faintly fluttering flames. I don't suppose that will help much, but it's better than nothing, she said, sighing. Oh, Maggie, look! Ivy pointed out of the glassless window. 2 cars had pulled up on either side of Hokum House. It's our dads. They'll be expecting us home for tea about now. I reckon my dad's gonna love my hair like this. Maggie swished her hair around like she was a rock star, standing in front of a window machine. Maggie, perspective, please. We've just watched a cat turn into a witch, half destroy a house, and promise to eat the child's heart so that she can live forever side by side with a demon. That's the last thing I'm worried about, is what my dad will think of my hair. Ivy put her hands on her head, trying to cover up as much of the vibrant color as she could. Why don't you like it? You love bright colors, like pink, Maggie said, tugging Ivy's hand away. Firstly, this is purple. Secondly, I might like the color pink, but that does not mean I think the color belongs on my head. Sorry, Amy. I know you didn't mean it, but I do not like this. I can try and fix it if you want. Amy raised her hands, which seemed to spark like she was short-circuiting. Nope, I'm good. Happy to buy some hair dye with my pocket money. That should fix this issue without any further risk. Come on, Ivy. Maggie grabbed Ivy's hand and led her to the front door, now hanging off its hinges crookedly. Better face the music. We'll come back first thing tomorrow and figure out a plan, Amethyst. She shouted over her shoulder. What about school? Ivy asked, horrified at the thought of not tending for a second day in a row. As important as school is, I think Maggie is right, Amethyst said, wringing her hands. We need a plan. Anywhere that lots of children are together might be the first place that Emerald goes. Yeah, and not getting my heart eaten by 300-year-old witch is slightly higher on my list of priorities than learning math, Maggie said. Fair point, Ivy said, and with a nod, tomorrow, first thing. She added as they scrambled out of the door towards their father's cars. Maggie caught up with Max first and ran straight into his arms. I'm so glad you're home. It's been such a weird day. So much has happened, and I know you don't remember everything about Hokum House and the witch, but I do need you to trust me because... Whoa. Max gently took Maggie's hands from round her waist. Excuse me, he called to Amethyst, who was still standing in the doorway of Hokum House. Is this your daughter? Maggie stumbled backwards away from Max, as if she'd been struck across the face. My daughter, Amethyst repeated, joining them at the front garden gate. Yes, you really ought to teach her about stranger danger. She came right up to me and hugged me as if she knew me. I could have been anyone. You gotta be careful, kid. Max opened up the boot and took out his backpack and slung it over his shoulder. He began to walk towards his home, but Maggie ran in front of him. Her arms spread wide to block the path. "Dad, it's me, it's Maggie, you're Maggie, I'm your daughter." Maggie's eyes had begun to fill with tears, and Ivy feared one more word from Max might send her over the edge. "Max, is everything okay?" Bill, Ivy's father, walked over from his own car to see what the commotion was. "Dad, you remember me, don't you?" Ivy asked quietly, knowing already what the answer would be. "Oh, I'm sorry, I don't have time for pranks today. I'm afraid I've got to focus on, as I'm almost finished with my new invention. It's a toaster that will never burn toast. Imagine that. Perfect toast every time." Bill grinned, his eyes glazed over. "Are you lost? Can I help at all?" He looked perturbed at the thought of two lost children, but seemed completely unaware that one of the children was actually belonged to him. "No, it's okay. Don't worry. You look a lot like my dad, that's all," Ivy said gently, as a tear rolled down her cheek. "These are my nieces. They've come to visit Aunt Amy for a little while," Amethyst said brightly. She opened the gate and beckoned for Ivy and Maggie back towards her house. "And we're playing a silly game, aren't we? A game that will be over soon," Amethyst said the last part pointedly to the girls, who cast a glance up at the green, glowing mountain that loomed over the village. They nodded miserably, then treaded in single file through the gate and back up the path to Hokum House. "Good night, gentlemen," Amethyst said sweetly, and followed the girls back up the path, leaving a perplexed Bill and Max, each to go home alone. That is the end of chapter 10. Uh-oh. First, the grown-ups didn't recognize Hokum House and how it had changed, and now they don't even recognize their own daughters. Whew, this is getting tricky. Come back tomorrow night and we'll read chapter 11. Sweet dreams.